Greetings, travelers.
Greetings, travelers. It is Erika and Mark for Monster May.
Monster May. Yes, Monster Mayhem has begun. So
Yes.
we are digging deep into cryptids and monsters. Don't worry, there'll be some other stuff thrown up in there too this month, but we've
We've
got a
got
lot
some
of guests
amazing
lined up.
guests. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of guests lined up this month, and we're going to be appearing on a couple other podcasts ourselves. So keep an eye out. We'll post links as we do.
Yes.
So.
And we're doing some traveling because we're going to the Hodad Festival.
Of all the monsters, yeah, we're actually doing a Hodag episode coming up with a deeper dive. Now, we talked about them a little bit at April Fool's because of the famous Hodag hoax, but we've done some more research and done some more things on the Hodag, so we have a whole episode of that coming up for you.
Which is exciting. But I do have some breaking news today, Mark.
Breaking news.
Okay, so I love this story because it has one of the things that's near and dear to my heart. And this was given to us by The Guardian. We'll put a link in the show notes. A North Carolina child's monster in the closet was, in fact, 50,000 bees in the wall.
Yes.
So apparently the daughter was complaining of hearing like noises and stuff like that, right? So they called people, and it turned out like they went to open the wall and bees just poured out like it was in something like Candyman, like all over the place. Honey was dripping out of the wall, which of course looked like really slow moving blood, which I appreciate. But they relocated all the bees to a bee sanctuary with 100-pound honeycomb.
Wow.
Which weighs more than my granddaughter. So
that's pretty big.
That's a big honeycomb, but I'm glad the bees are safe. I'm glad the girl doesn't think she's crazy. And I'm also glad it wasn't a monster. Because I'll take bees in my wall over a monster any day of the week.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. Yeah.
But we also have, just for all of our Star Wars Eerie travelers, this airs the day before May the 4th be with you. So if by chance you're listening to this on Saturday, May the 4th be with you.
Yeah. May the 4th be with you, Revenge of the 5th, and Return of the 6th. So, it's it's all good. You can have a Star Wars weekend. And speaking of Star Wars monsters, oh my gosh, there's a whole thing we could do someday. Go with the Rancor, the Wampa, and all these other fun things.
Very true. Very true. But today we're going to talk about a different kind of monster, and one a lot of our travelers are not big fans of in a way, because they're some of the scariest kind of monster.
Right. It's kind of funny because we are storytellers, right?
Yes.
That is what we do. We are digging into mythology, folklore, but also stories. And now, not all of our stuff is fictitious. Our stuff is what people saw, and they discussed it and drew it and think about it, and also things that people have talked to us about and things they've seen and all that. So yeah, there's things that we can go, okay, this is, it sounds fictitious, but is it really?
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we do with all this stuff, is we dig into all this and we start finding some of these things may have bases in reality, but some, are basically tall tales. The American frontier has its own mythology. We get a lot of these handed down to us thanks to advertising. Okay. So I'm going to take us in the Wayback Machine.
Which we have cleaned out, just so in case you're wondering, travelers.
We did spring cleaning. We've got a little air freshener hanging in there, a Flatwoods Monster air freshener. It's all good. It smells like pine and sulfur. It's amazing. But we're going back to 1910.
Okay.
And the reason we're going back to 1910, these stories predate that. But in 1910, a book is compiled by a man named William Cox. And it is called Fearsome Creatures of the Lumber Woods. Of the lumber woods, with a few desert and mountain beasts. Okay.
Okay.
In 1939, another book comes out called Fearsome Critters, and that one's by Henry Tyron. And then there's some other Paul Bunyan stories and stuff like that. And the reason these come out is there was a newspaper articles in the 1920s that were called like Yarns of the Big Woods. And they would feature these oral traditions from loggers and lumberjacks.
Mm-hmm.
And now think about the lumberjack industry by this time had kind of already become modernized. But back in the day, these towns would build up around logging camps. These guys would mostly Midwest. We're talking along the Lake Erie, Lake Superior, Great Lakes areas, those mountains of, they're not really mountains, but woods of Michigan and Missouri and all that, Montana, that area, and that whole north part of the United States.
Uh-huh.
And they would gang up on these trees, and these camps would work 18 hours a day. These guys would get there because there wasn't much else to do except be productive. And if you weren't being productive, you didn't get as much money at the end of the season.
Yeah.
And also, you would be razzed by the other guys. You weren't working as hard as the other guys and all that. So you would work these 18-hour days, and then you would go crash and hopefully fall right asleep. And then as the new guys came in, they'd want to be entertained and all that. And you would send them out for our first critter, the snipe.
The snipe?
You know about snipes? You ever been on a snipe hunt?
No, because why would I ever do that?
All right. So snipes were little chicken-sized creatures. They're little birds with a long, thin neck. And you would get a stick and a bag. And then they would say, go out and get us some fresh snipe meat. Right? They would tell these young guys who would come in. And they would tell them, okay, they usually nest bottom of this tree, over in this area. And then, be careful because you might bump into Bigfoot or a cactus cat or some of these other monsters that are out there. And of course, these are ones we'll talk about a little bit, like the hide behind. Watch out for the hide behind. Depending on the area you were in, and including our boy, the hodag, and our other favorite, the squonk.
Yes.
Right? Depending on where you were, these were things that you had to watch out for. And then you also had to watch out for other birds, like the goofus bird.
Wait a minute, that doesn't sound like a real thing.
Okay, well, the goofus bird, the way it works is it flies backwards and it builds its nest upside down. That's why they call it the goofus bird.
Okay. Is that a real thing? It flies backwards?
It's a tall tail.
Oh my gosh. I was like, you're saying this so convincingly. I'm like,
that's
sounds
exactly,
like
but you're the new lumberjack in town, right? They're telling you to watch out for these things. And then the other thing you gotta watch out for is a hoop snake.
No, what is that, a hula hoop?
What it does is it bites its tail like an Ouroboros and makes itself into a wheel so it can roll after you to get you.
Okay, that one I wouldn't have fallen for. I already fell for one though, so I'm not very proud of myself.
So you're going out hunting for a snipe, right?
Okay.
And you would wander for a day or two, sometimes, usually a few hours. And you come back and everybody be laughing at you because there's no such thing as a snipe. Right. And that is the prank is go for a snipe hunt. Right. That was the thing. So some of these stories, of course, are obviously, these are prank monsters, right? The hoop snake, the goofus bird, the big-tailed cat. Now that one, it's basically a giant cat. It's like a mountain lion, but it has a long tail with like a mace on the end for smacking you.
What is with all these whoop-ass animals that have these weapons? I don't get
trees. One of my favorites is the agropelter. And it goes and lives up in trees and throws sticks and rocks at you. But when you start looking into these stories, and they pass down generation
Yeah.
of these loggers, right? And they're constantly swapping out guys every season. And what happens is a lot of the guys disappear, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've got troops of guys out chopping logs, right? You've
Yeah.
got other guys working the camp to keep the camp running. They sharpen the axes, they feed everybody, they dress everybody. Then there's the guys who roll them down the hill so that they can get to the water. Then you got the guys who ride the logs out before barges, and then they got smart. Oh, we'll start building mills nearby. Then you've got the guys who load them onto carts and wheel them out. So all these guys have very important jobs, and then a lot of times they just disappear. And there's lots of ways to die out there, right?
Yeah.
And chopping down a tree, that's why we shout timber. Somebody shouts timber. What do? You get out of the way.
Yeah.
But some guys don't. And the reason they shout timber is because some people didn't, and they would die. And, rolling down the hill, somebody gets crushed, somebody steering them down the river.
There is also legitimate things like bears and mountain lions and
exactly.
copperheads. And, there are some bugs that are poisonous. Like there's a few things that are not pleasant.
Right. But that's just it. Some of these guys, they had to make it so it wasn't just a copperhead that killed that guy. It was a hoop snake. That's why he could run from a copperhead, but there was no way he's get away from a hoop snake.
Exactly.
There's a guy who, something fell on his head. A tree branch fell and hit him on the head. Well, that's probably an outgrow pelter, or the big-tailed cat got him. There even out in the Southwest, they had the cactus cat that had like thorns that it could stab you with, right? And, but they had, for every one of these stories, they had things to protect yourselves from them, right? They would have, to avoid this, it doesn't like alcohol. So as long as you carried a little bit of alcohol on you, even though you usually weren't allowed alcohol at camps, that was your excuse to carry alcohol. Some of them didn't like salt. Hey, that sounds familiar, right? Some of them don't like iron. So carry some railroad spikes, or, have a railroad spike or some piece of iron on you. That sounds familiar. This is stuff that was carried over from ancient traditions and folklore. So we get some of these animals, they sound so silly and they sound like goofy things, but then you start looking into them and you go, oh, okay, this is some stuff. Now, when I said advertising was the reason that we have all these stories, this was pretty much oral tradition, right? We talk these monsters and things like that. Well, the Red Lumber Carpenter Company decides that, they're a lumber mill. They've gone modern and all that. And America needs some heroes in the early 1900s because it's World War I, it's coming. We've already had the Spanish-American War. We've survived a few things, but we have no real folklore of our own, no heroes of our own. So that's when they invent our man, Paul Bunyan. Now, he had been around.
Oh my gosh, I've forgotten about Paul Bunyan. I haven't heard that name in forever. You got to explain who Paul Bunyan is.
Exactly. Paul Bunyan was another one of those lumberjack stories. He was the guy they all wanted to be. He was supposedly a giant. The real stories say he was probably around 7 or 8 feet tall. We don't know if he was a real guy, but we kind of think he might have actually been a real guy and just, built these tall tales to make him even better.
I was going to say, there's a lot. It's kind of like the Billy the Kid. He was a real person. It's just
the stories make him bigger, larger than life. That's what these are. It's yellow journalism. It's the tall tale. Let's make it better than he was. And of course, Paul Bunyan was known for, chopping down trees like crazy. And he had a big ox, Babe. And again, Babe was never named until this advertising book came out in 1910. It was before that, it was just a big ox. And these advertising guys just said, let's name the ox. And they're like, well, we got to give him a name. Well, what's a cute name for an ox? Oh, Babe. That'll be cute. Babe. And that's where a lot of this stuff just comes from. Because there is no history of Babe before that book. There's history of him having an ox. It's part of the stories. But again, we don't have a name for him. That's
and that kind of makes sense because they did need things to move the lumber. It wasn't like there was a lumber truck.
No, they had horses and oxen, and they would hitch them to the carts. But Babes was 20 feet tall, and by this time Paul Bunyan's 50 feet tall, and he's the last of the giants, the biblical giants. The story is he was born in Maine, and he was so big that he kept smashing his cribs, so they had to build him a special crib, and they rocked him to sleep out in the sea, and the waves would rock him to sleep.
Waves would rock me to sleep. That would have been a brilliant place to put a bed.
He was crushing towns by creating tidal waves. So the British Navy had to shoot at him with cannons to stop him. That's how the stories would build, right? And these things would grow up.
So crazy.
One of my favorite stories was his beard, right? Was crazy. It would grow so fast and so thick. And he would get so frustrated trying to eat at the big mess hall that he would lose forks and knives in his massive beard. So 2 men in the camp were always assigned to be his personal barbers. And they would spend weeks sharpening their saws and their hatchets, and they would cut his beard just like trimming pine trees. And they would have to shout timber after each stalk of his beard was cut, and it would fall to the ground, and it would ruin axes and saws. Yeah, it's a crazy story, right? The best they could give him was like a 5 o'clock shadow, and they would have to immediately start prepping again because he would need another shave in a week. He kept getting stuffed up because he did have allergies. That's one thing Paul Bunyan did have, was allergies. So they had to give him a special snuff. And, snuff is a nice little thing you put in your nose to clear your sinuses.
You got to explain a little more what snuff was, though, because
it's the stuff you put in your nose to make you feel happy. So we don't need to discuss any further about that. But it was a little pre what we think of now. But it was still, the way they did for him was they had a special one made for him that was made of lightning and bees. And he would put that up his nose. Speaking of our story earlier.
Wow, that tied in well, and I didn't even
know about it, right?
Yeah.
And then he would sniff that, and then he would sneeze, and it would clean out the forest all the way to Michigan. So they could just chop the wood and prep it for shipping. So.
Oh, okay. That sounds not at all real.
All right. So because of this, some of these monsters get lumped in with Paul Bunyan, right? And they're goofy, they're fun, they're hysterical. There's one of my favorites is the Gumbaroo. This is a hairless bear with invulnerable skin.
Wow.
It repelled everything fired at it. And the only thing that could kill it is if you could throw fire into its mouth, and it would explode from the inside.
Okay.
Paul Bunyan had to kill one of those.
Oh, well, of course.
Now, one of the famous things Paul Bunyan had to tussle with was our boy, the Hodag.
I didn't realize Paul Bunyan was tied to the Hodag.
He had a fight with the Hodag, and an epic fight with an epic Hodag, apparently, like a kaiju Hodag.
Oh, well, who knew?
Yeah. And that's the start, right? We're at the tip of the iceberg here. There are so many things that we are going to have to go into, but we're going to go into some of the ones that I think might actually be a bit more real in a bit. But I'm going to give you a couple more fun tall tale ones. Are you ready for these?
I am.
All right. The Dungavin Hooter.
Wow. God bless you. What?
Is a crocodile with no mouth but huge nostrils.
Okay.
And it used its tail to pound loggers into a gaseous vapor, which it then inhaled for sustenance.
Wow.
Think about that.
I want to know who sits down and comes up with this, though. That's what I want to know.
This is what loggers with nothing else but time on their hands would come up with these monsters.
Jeez. Okay.
All right. The tea kettler.
The
tea kettler. This one's not so bad. It's a small vermin that looked a little like a chipmunk, but had armor plating like an armadillo, but was actually metal.
Okay.
And it would make so much noise that they called it the tea kettler because it would sound like a clanking pile of tea kettles. So,
Okay. This is
um,
getting weird now.
there's the gilly galoo bird. It's another one of those birds. This one lays eggs on tops of mountains, and it lays square eggs so that they don't roll downhill.
Okay. I feel like I need to be really drunk to hear that story. So that's what I'm going to say about that.
All right. And another fun one is, we went to our hoop snake. The other one is the snow snake.
Okay.
They're only active in the winter. Only in the winter, which, most snakes sleep in the winter. But these guys, that's their time to thrive because they're white and they blend into the snow and they'll burrow through the snow and they'll bite your ankles while you're out trying to get wood or whatever.
Okay. I don't think that's
and then,
a
of
thing.
course, there's the Galawacus.
Okay. What is that?
That is basically somewhere between a lion, a boar, and a bear.
A lion, a boar, and a bear?
Yeah, it's more like a chimera or something like
Okay.
that, or a griffin where it's a mix of animals. And it apparently was a circus animal that traveled along to entertain lumberjacks quite a bit and had been captured many a time.
Wow.
So, what do you think of some of these, Erika? Would you be interested in encountering some of these and all that?
No, because guess what? No one would effing believe what I was saying. Like, there are some things I could go, I saw a Bigfoot. Some people would believe me if I said I saw a Bigfoot. I have not seen a Bigfoot, so I'm not claiming that yet. But I say yet, but I encountered this thing that lays square eggs. Like, they put me away. This is what a loony bin is for. That's just craziness. It's not
All
even a
right.
real thing.
So I do have one story about the agropelter because I just love that name.
Okay.
The agropelter is the more violent variety of fearsome creature, right? It lives in hollow trees and conifer forests, usually from Maine to Oregon, so all along the northern US.
Okay.
And it waits in its tree until someone walks right underneath it, right?
Okay.
And then it throws branches at you, usually at your head. And the victims are usually found pinned dead under a branch. Now, one survivor of an agropelter attack was a man known as Big Ol' Kittleson.
Okay.
In the early Paul Bunyan stories, he was known as the Big Swede. He didn't even have a name. But this is one where we find out he did have a name, Big Ol' Kittleson. And he was lucky. The branch thrown at him was rotten, and it allowed him to escape relatively unharmed. And he was able to give a description of the creature. It was the first time we have a description of it.
Okay.
Slender and wiry. It had the villainous face of an ape and arms like muscular whiplashes, which it uses to snap off the dead branches. And it hurls them through the air like shots from a six gun. That was his quote. It is said to have a diet of local birds and rotten wood. And so mostly woodpeckers, owls, and stuff like that. And they're scarce enough, so that's why the population never gets too big of these things. And they always have, now this is one thing that the lumberjack said, was it always has an odd numbered litter. And they only give birth on February 29th.
Okay. So
the only leap
how
year
would they even know that?
That's
my
the question. Who studied this?
First of all, I already know a bunch of lumberjacks are not following these things around because in order to get a piece of information like that, you would have to study them for years and make sure throughout that whole entire year they did not get pregnant again.
Yep.
Liar, liar, pants on fires.
Now the question is, why did they attack humans if they only eat birds and things like that? So some say it was just they're trying to get your attention to scare you away. Others think they were malicious and intentional and that they were going to stuff them into the hollow logs and save them for meals later.
Well, that's how I ferment my meat.
Yeah, exactly. I like the whiplash arms. I think that's That's
What
kind of
is
fun.
that? What
Now
does that mean to you, Mark? Whiplash arms.
I'm thinking like big, long, snaky arms. I'm thinking like Whiplash, the comic book character, because
Are
that's
you are you
I'm a nerd.
thinking like a spaghetti man?
Like spaghetti arms,
Okay,
like Slender Man arms, maybe. Tentacles.
okay.
So
I don't think
now,
any of that's accurate, but good, 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 good.
but yeah, if you're a lumberjack, just watch out when you're walking by a hollow tree, because you never know. So, all right. Now, with that said,
Yeah,
doesn't
because your buddy could be in there from Whiplash.
yeah. Now, part of me thinks a little bit though. Doesn't that sound a little bit like our puck wedgies
It
that we call
does actually.
stump jumpers? That's what I'm like. It's just a variant of this where they made it worse, and that's why I think there may be some encounters that people had, and then they got turned into tall tales.
Well, it makes sense because some of this stuff, if you say you almost have to be quote unquote joshing somebody because otherwise you'd be the laughing stock.
Right, right. And so you have to say, okay, watch out for that. But you could be saying that just because you don't want to sound like an idiot, right? I don't want to sound crazy, but how many times do we hear that?
Yeah, no, we hear it all the time. And I
Now,
agree.
when we come back from our break, I have some scary ones for us.
Oh,
So
good. That's just what
I
I need
think
to be
may have
scary.
a little more meat on their bones.
Oh.
And then we'll do a little bit of lumberjack folklore at the end that just, some of it's good advice. So
Okay.
I'll give you one little tip from that right off the bat before the break. Don't walk on someone's grave or you'll be haunted by their ghost. Think about that. And we'll see you after these breaks. Most know Florida as the land of endless sunny beaches, but the state is home to numerous eerie legends and mysterious creatures. The Everglades is home to the elusive skunk ape. In Key West lies an uncanny doll reputed to have a life of its own. Join Mark Muncy and illustrator Carrie Schultz as they uncover the history behind the state's creepiest stories in unusual locations. The Dark Side of the Sunshine State, presented in Eerie, Florida, from History Press.
Destiny Beard, the lyrical soprano who will haunt your dreams. With her alluring melodies and intricate harmonies, this dark siren of wistful song shall capture your soul and lead you into the night. Check out Destiny's new single, The Haunting Is Over, with international musicians Sam Haines and Gary Bennett, as well as her other musical works at destinybeard.com.
We're back.
We're back, and Paul Bunyan and Whiplash arms, and I don't even know whether to be terrified or amazed at this point. Like I'm having a blast cage of emotion on this entire thing.
Yeah, right. I mean, this is stuff we were working on a little bit for our new Eerie Travels Presents book. Was some of these were basically Appalachian monsters, and some of them are lumberjack monsters. And I think now that we're getting into the ones that I'm about to talk about, these are ones that I think have some teeth, literal teeth, right?
Literal teeth. I like that.
Yeah. So the first one I want to talk about, we've discussed these before,
Okay.
and they're called Grims.
Ooh.
Do you know about the Grim?
I know Grimm and Grimm fairy tales and stuff. What is the Grimm?
The Grim itself is basically a red-eyed beast that guards cemeteries.
Oh.
This giant morph creature, this black mass with red eyes. Now, I think a lot of the stories of the Grims, they're very dog-like. Now, remember our story about cemetery guardians. What is it that people bury to protect the cemetery?
They always bury a dog. A dog gets
Or a
buried
soldier.
first.
Yep, and it could easily morph into this grim creature, right? So there are many encounters with these documented throughout history. So I think that may be more than a folktale, right?
Oh, somebody asked on one of our past episodes what cryptid I'd want to meet. Now I'm changing my mind. I want to meet a Grim.
Okay.
I think that would be cool. I think I'd be a good person to have a Grim companion.
Okay. Okay. Now that goes dog. So up next, we got to go cat.
Okay.
This one's sometimes called the Cherokee Death Cat,
Ooh.
right? And it's a cat-like beast that's looks more like a lion than a bobcat or a panther or anything like that. And they're about 4 feet tall at its front shoulder and like 9 feet long in general when I get descriptions of them. And they can leap extremely far, are expert climbers, and they navigate trees with ease. They feed on livestock, cows, and horses, and they always go for the jugular. They always go for the throat.
Well, and I think that a lot of cats do that inherently. I mean, that's like a cat-like quality. Even house cats, if you die around them or become super ill and don't feed them, they'll eventually go for the jugular.
Yep. And now this also ties into our wampus cats that we've had many reports of, and even including like what they call the alien big cats, the ABCs, where it's big cats that shouldn't be where they are. And so I think there might be a bit more, again, teeth to this one.
Do you think that, you know, with everything we're learning, kind of like that whole panther thing and stuff, like let's for a moment look at the fact that we maybe do not know everything about where creatures are. There may inherently be creatures in certain areas, but that doesn't mean they're always there.
Right.
Do you think this is something that indigenous people actually saw? Because the land masses weren't always the way they were now, and these stories would have been passed down for a millennia.
And that's exactly what I think. I think some of these lumberjack stories were native lore sometimes that the lumberjacks picked up, right, as they were moving into the area. And that's where we get another one, the smoke wolf, which smoke wolf, which was basically solid black smoke wolf is just a giant canine with red eyes, always with red eyes. And you could hear them at night and they kill for evil. They just kill for fun. And the only thing that can deter a smoke wolf was the sound of rattling chains.
So if you were a prisoner, or a ghost from Christmas past, you were in good shape.
You got a chance against the smoke wolf, right?
Yeah. And then I just want to, how does one determine that that's the only thing that shakes it off?
Exactly. We've got a lot of wampus beasts that fit that description. Wampus cats, wampus dogs. They all fit that kind of same giant black beast that is easily scared by noise, but otherwise is terrifying. One of the creatures that they talked about was beware of the wolf man.
Ooh, so dog man.
Exactly,
Dog man.
right?
Yeah.
And this one was near Wolf County, Kentucky, was where it was first reported. And it was around 500 pounds, standing taller than 7 feet in height, bipedal, similar to a bear or gorilla. And it was supposedly seen in caves and been seen since the 1870s all the way up to the 1970s. But then in the 1970s, suddenly it's called Dog Man, and it's the same thing. And
why do you think that happened? Do you think that because werewolves had become so popular in sort of literature and all that kind of stuff,
the movies,
they went, okay, we can't, kind of like Mothman. It looked like a bat, and people went, well, we can't call it Batman because of the comic book, so why don't we call it Mothman?
Exactly. Now, the next one is called the Raven Mocker. And this is another one that I think when you listen to it, this is a Cherokee, again, legend, and it's a shapeshifter that's around 7 feet tall with black fur and solid white eyes. And it's been seen everywhere from Southwest Virginia. That's Southwest Virginia, not West Virginia. And then it could shift into any animal or even an old man or woman when it would talk to you. And it would come to you as a human form, and it would lurk amongst tribes and then eat the hearts of people without ever leaving a mark.
So unlike Spearfinger that had to use the weapon,
yeah,
this one, the heart would just be gone?
just be gone. Now, the big thing, the reason it's called the raven mocker is it would sound like a raven when it tried to talk. So it would sound like a person being impersonated by a raven. Now, the
That's
reason I think this
interesting.
one might have some legitimacy to it is it's very similar to our spearfinger. It's very similar to some of the other things that we've discussed in the past that are known to mock humans and shapeshift into human form to get what they want.
You know
Right?
what's interesting is I kind of wonder, and this is for maybe, I mean, we're going to be talking to Al going back here soon. He might have the answer. I just have to remember to ask him. But I kind of wonder from indigenous lore if there was a ritual that cursed people, like they talk about Spearfinger, right?
Yeah.
If that's perpetrated, you got to wonder what the hell could be wandering around out there.
Exactly. And now the next one I think is going to give you the willies. The
I'm already like not leaving my house ever again.
uh,
So it's
these
fine.
are the Dark Watchers.
Oh, I don't like that. No,
I knew I knew the name alone was going to get you.
nope,
So,
I'm out.
and now this actually starts in this Santa Lucia mountain range in California.
Okay.
So they basically were the barrier from California to the central United States, right? They kept things away from the coast, and early explorers basically couldn't cross them to get to the Pacific, and they literally just drop into the ocean at the end. But people think there's stuff hidden in them. But these things have been seen all the way over to our fun friend, the Hodag area up in Wisconsin. What people see is they gave them this name. They're called the Dark Watchers. They appear as tall, mysterious, dark figures with silhouettes, and they kind of just are up on top of mountaintops looking down at you. And they're usually seen during late afternoon or twilight. And when the sun starts descending, you look up and you can see them. And they just kind of stand there wearing hats and just looking like people. Some have pointed out they can be up to 10 feet or even taller. And they appear dressed, usually sometimes wearing capes or mostly wearing hats. And they're just tall shadows with a human-like silhouette that look at you.
Do we think it's a Hat Man?
It's exactly. That's my thought immediately is this sounds like the Hat Man in the wild, right? Or the shadow people in the wild. And if you do try to approach them, they just disappear in an instant.
Wow.
And now documented, they started showing up around the 1930s, but the Chumash tribe has no real records of them, but there's tales that have been passed down amongst that tribe that say they've been seen there for generations. And the early Spanish explorers even noticed these things and called them Los Vigilantes Oscuros, literally dark watchers.
What? But that doesn't. I mean, I guess shadow. It's who knows what it could be. It could be a man in black. We don't know.
Now, black flowing capes. We don't know why they watch. And some people say they're actually a tribe that lives up there and just hides. Some people say they're Bigfoot. And that's why, a bit more like urbanized Bigfoot where they wear clothes. And when people get close to them, that's why they disappear, right?
Well, I'm not going for that. I was there with the shadow people, but we have to remember there was a point in time there weren't structures. So if there were shadow people, they were in the places that weren't like a house, because there wasn't a house.
Right, exactly. This was, just what you did. Now, the next one is one that a lot of people, we've mentioned it many a time, but we've never really done a deep dive on it. And that is the hide behind. No.
Yeah.
We've mentioned Paul Bunyan. Our other boy is Pecos Bill.
Oh, Pecos Bill.
He's the cowboy, right? We had the lumberjacks. Yeah. We also have the cowboys. And the cowboys came up with their own stuff. That's where we get things like the jackalope and the Mongolian death worm, which is another thing we'll have to talk about. Beau wants me to do a deep dive on it. So
Beau's a fan of the Mongolian death worm.
Yep. So those will get mentioned later.
But it's interesting because I also think as we're going through this and we're going to talk about the hide behinds and look, travelers, I'm making you wait a moment. But I think it's interesting to note that the perceptions of different races of people on certain creatures and things like this.
Yeah. So the hide behind is basically folklore that preys on humans, walk through the woods. And it basically was one of the main reasons that cowboys and loggers disappear, right? It was the hide behind got them.
Yeah.
And it conceals itself when someone looks directly at it. It disappears. And it usually quickly hides behind an object, so it cannot be directly seen. I liked in the wonderful show Gravity Falls, it's a two-dimensional creature, so it can just turn sideways and like look at a piece of paper from the side. It's gone. You don't see it. So
Yeah.
now they're usually victims are dragged back to their lair to be devoured. And the big thing about hide behinds, it has a very specific thing it feeds on. You know, we talk about the wonderful Return of the Living Dead zombies eating brains, where most zombies eat all flesh. Return of the Living Dead only eat the brains. Hide behinds, they only eat the intestines.
Well, that's gross.
And they have a severe aversion to alcohol. So that's your repellent.
Oh.
Drunk, they won't touch you.
Oh, then I'll be good.
Yeah. Now, despite the fact nobody's able to really see one, the early descriptions are it's like a giant dog or a giant canine. And that's why it's like, okay, fits the Dogman legend a little bit, where they can blend in and hide so easily and all that. Now, the hide behind kind of disappears from folklore for a little while. But in modern times, it's come back. And the reason it's come back is one new thing that people do now that they used to never do. What is that? You think, where maybe you would see something behind you that you normally wouldn't see behind you, because we all started a new thing we do now when we have our phones with us.
Selfie.
Selfies. Because what happens when you take a selfie? You're getting the stuff behind you. And so that's why hide behinds have become a newer thing. Again, with the rise of creepypasta, they kind of came back. And that's why they're in so much modern folklore. Harry Potter, they did it in the Pottermore book by J.K. Rowling. She talked about in Ilvermony in the website. They talk about hide behinds. And again, Gravity Falls, a bunch of other stuff. Hide behinds are back, baby.
They are. And the thing is that I think from a lore standpoint, they're one of the few creatures, I'm going to use that word or whatever, because we don't know what they actually look like, right?
Right.
That people just disappear. Like the only people that can even talk to them are people that got away, but their stories are shaky at best.
Like there's one story about a lady who was in a canoe, and she's literally in the canoe, and she takes the selfie, and that's when she sees something in the woods behind her, freaks her out so much that she paddles away, miles away. But then she notices the sound around her goes quiet. She can't see anything. She puts her phone up again, and there it is again. It's been following her for miles, and supposedly she disappears, and then that's the pictures that are left on her phone are her and something weird in the background.
See,
right?
now I'm going to have to clickety-clack this to see if I can find one of these pictures to put up.
Well, it's again, that's a creepypasta version of it, so I don't know if that's a real story or not, but that one's made the rounds quite a bit and things like that. It hasn't been sent to us yet, but I have seen that one sent to some other shows. But I do have one that I'm going to talk about real quick, and this is one I got for Eerie, Appalachia. And I think this is probably one of the coolest stories I was told. And there's a dozen witnesses for this, but when I tell the story, you're going to understand why I can't give it 100%. Yes, this is real, but this is, to me, is a modern lumberjack tale.
Okay. I am riveted.
Okay. So just outside the town of Evington, Virginia, there's basically a small cluster of farms just off Highway 29. And one family there is really known for making the best moonshine. All the way through Prohibition, they still do it to this day. They basically supply their illegal alcohol to everybody around the state, right? And the farms work together to protect the operation from outsiders, right? Because they're giving them the
Okay.
potatoes, they're giving them all the ingredients, and let's keep this safe. Now, larger illegal operations moved into the area, mostly in kind of the more urban areas, and shine running was kind of becoming a bit more trouble than it was worth, right? So this family had one guy, he's kind of the nerdy brother of the
Okay.
kid. And he figured out if he looked at his grandma's old recipe book, she had some stuff that could kick up some stuff, right? And she could make it a little better. Now, what he didn't realize is grandma was an Appalachian witch. So she had some of her old European black magic books mixed in with her recipe books. These were things she used for medicinal purposes. She was a good old, mountain witch. So the roots he added, the things she had recommended, were of a mystical nature and kind of made this very potent alcohol that's very powerful.
Wow.
And the first round of testing went very well, according to the family members that told me this. And they had a huge party to celebrate the new brew with all the local farms, right? You gotta try this stuff because that's what you do, right?
Yeah.
You get something good, you're like, get over here. So the young chemist there, he kind of noticed this constant sense of movement around the corners of his eyes.
Okay.
He was basically running from shadow to shadow. And he immediately started panicking and thought rats might be getting into the crops, in the storage. And so he starts telling everybody, oh my God, we got something's getting into the stuff. We can't have that. That's the worst thing that can happen. So everybody, this is Virginia. What do you think everybody started doing?
Trying to shoot at the rats.
They all start drawing guns, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say
And
this sounds like a rat thing. Yeah.
as the shrieks start happening because people start seeing the darting shadows, everybody opens fire, right?
Like
And
you do.
nobody's hitting anything. And they realize this isn't rats, this is something else. So the creatures seem to be slick and oily.
Ooh.
And they were small black balls of wet, dripping teeth.
These sound like critters.
Exactly, right? That's what I thought when he was describing this. He's like, light seemed to not be able to catch them because they were moving so fast from shadow to shadow. So they started lighting fires everywhere because that's a good mix with the alcohol.
I
And the
love this
guns.
idea. I love this family already.
Let's chase it away. Now, one brother got one cornered and he put it in a feed sack. When he reached in to grab it, it said it moved like lightning. And then he starts screaming because it almost severed his hand at the wrist. And he starts
Ooh.
screaming, it bites, it bites, it bites. So the next morning, they all survived. They all calmed down. They figured it's the shine that was causing all this because they never found another critter. They took the one guy to the hospital, and there were a lot of people, several wounded people. And because of that, the police came and busted the whole ring.
Well, that sucks.
Now, the chemist, according to the family member that talked to me, said he wound up in an asylum because he was convinced that it was not hallucinations. These were things that exist in all the shadows around. And because of the potion that they had made, basically, the strange mix had opened up everybody's eyes and they were able to see it. And he is terrified of the dark. And the reason they had to lock him up is because every night he would just scream, it bites, it bites.
Wow.
And when I was talking to the family, literally right after I had written all this down and I was so impressed, they called me a few days later and said, all right, we've all been arrested again. And they found us again. And then like 2 weeks, 2 weeks later, I'm on my final edit And they called me again. All right, we're out. We're good. If you need any more story, let us know. And they described it as basically Venom's head from the comic books, the comic book Spider-Man villain
Oh
Venom.
yeah.
And
No, and Tom Hardy plays that character
Tom
on
Hardy
TV.
movies. Yep.
No, that is.
Imagine that slimy and oily living in the shadows of every
So
corner.
what do you think it was?
I kind of like that explanation that the family kind of figured that the chemist may have been right, that this was the potions let them see it, that this stuff's always there. And that scares me. And that's almost a Doctor Who thing. They did a Doctor Who villain called the Vasta Narada that lives in shadows and eats people. And they live in forests. And I'm like, wait, that's the hide behind. That's this. This sounds like little hide behinds, little puckwudgies, little
See,
things
now
like
I'm
that.
never going to go out in the wilderness again, Mark.
Hey, these are everywhere.
Ever.
These are everywhere in the dark. So,
Well, lights are staying on in my house forever. Forever and ever.
So-
and I got Tolly and Garrus here to protect me, although they're both sleeping right now
so
because
not quite lumberjacks, but along the lines. So travelers, our travel for this episode is go to the Hodag Festival and learn lumberjack stories and go
Well, I
to
was gonna say there are some pretty famous stories. There is a Paul Bunyan statue you can go visit.
Yep.
There are places you can travel to see and hear some of these stories for some of these creatures. But, as we always say, be safe and don't go alone.
Yeah, and logging industry has completely changed modernly and all that. So there are lots of fun things. There are plenty of mountain monster museums and things like that you can do. So I'm gonna give a few more lumberjack pieces of advice here while we got a couple more minutes here. So
Okay.
when two people of the same name live in a house, ghosts will stay away. That's why there's so many juniors.
Really? I
That's
had
why.
no idea.
Never carry an axe or a hoe into a house because that means death is coming.
Okay, good to know.
All right. Death always travels in threes. If someone close to you dies, that means two more are coming. Now that we've heard that on celebrities and things like that, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Horses and pigs can see death and ghosts.
I believe that actually.
Yep. A star pattern quilt on your bed will protect you from evil spirits. Now that goes back to hex marks on barns and stuff like that too.
Yeah.
That star pattern that'll protect you. A cat that eats grass means it's going to rain soon.
What? Really?
That's one of the folklore things. I like this
Okay.
one. Visitors should always depart by the same door they entered to prevent bad luck to themselves and the hosts.
Okay.
Have you ever heard that one?
No.
So
Now I have, but no.
milk or food stolen from a neighbor and fed to a child will cure whooping cough. Back before
Milk
we had,
stolen from a neighbor. Well, what?
if a kid has whooping cough, you have to steal milk from a neighbor to give it to him.
Okay, I'm not on board with that. That sounds
All right.
bad.
Now, say you're expecting a baby in the house.
Yeah.
Gender of the first visitor on New Year's Day to a home will determine the firstborn sex on that year.
Okay. That's a lot to keep track of.
And also could be the first animal born too. And to prevent bad luck, don't burn sassafras wood.
Well,
and
that's just the smell. I'm going to be
Don't
honest.
eat honey on the day a relative is buried.
Okay. Why is that?
That's also to prevent bad luck.
Okay.
Don't point your finger at a graveyard or it may rot off.
Okay.
So I have that problem and my fingers have never rotted off, but I always go, "Ooh, look, a graveyard."
Oh, that's because you excitedly want to go visit it.
Yes. And again, one of them is when driving by a cemetery or passing by a cemetery, hold your breath to avoid inhaling the soul of someone whose body was recently interred.
Okay, now I'm going to hold my breath every time we go past the cemetery.
Yeah. And then the last one, there's tons of these. I could literally go on. Leave a single apple hanging at the end of your harvest so that the devil can have that and not anything in your family.
Interesting. Interesting. You
And
gotta
one
trick the
more, I
fence.
got to do this one because we live in this area. Gather acorns during a thunderstorm, place them on your windowsills, and it will protect your home from lightning.
I wonder if that actually works.
I don't know. I want to try all of these, right?
Okay, I'm on board. I'm on board. Well, some of them I don't think we should try because the end result is not great.
No,
but
no, that's true. That's true. Some of these may not be the best legend tripping. But again, if you want to read more about it, the book Fearsome Critters is probably the one I would look for. That's the firsthand accounts by Henry H. Tyron. So,
well, we will put that in the show notes.
yep. And Fearsome Creatures of the Lumberwoods by William Cox. Those are the good ones. All right, gang. Wow.
Wow.
That's a trip, right?
Yeah.
I would like to thank that wonderful family that told me the story of the bites. Carrie did an amazing illustration of that that's available at our new store that's available on eerietravels.com. So you can get a print of that or check us out on Eerie Travels. You can find out where we're going to be and catch us in person. Get us to sign some things for you. And
Oh, you know what? Conveniently, we're going to be at the Hodag Festival, and we
Yes.
don't generally get that far north. So any of our travelers up that way or in Canada, you may want to come stop by because it's not very frequent we get that far up that direction.
Yep, it's a hop, skip, and a jump from Michigan friends and our other friends up in that area. So definitely, please join us. We don't get that way very often, and if we get enough people there, we'll try to come back more. But
Exactly.
but we were happily invited, and we're excited to be a part of this fun event up there. The Hodag Festival looks like a hoot. I'm excited to be there. We have our good friends at the Hodag store there, so we're gonna have fun with that. So.
Absolutely.
With that, Erika, I think we're wrapping up. So again, thank you to our patrons on Patreon for joining us. They are getting the early listener questions and the early listener tales episodes. So if you want to join that, they get them live so they can respond and ask questions immediately. Please join that for $1 or $2 a month. You can get a lot of fun. And we appreciate their support so much. And I think with that, we are ready to head out and walk into the woods at night. We'll keep our selfie cameras on to watch for the hide behinds, but we'll also keep our eyes open for hoop snakes and agropelters and who knows what other creatures could be out there. And we will see you on the other side.